Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hi there, Herman and Corn. So I've mentioned in our several episodes about my experience living here in the Iran-Israel war. Yes, that guy's talking about that Iran-Israel war again. It's not that it was a particularly significant time in my life, although it was because our son was born just after it. So it was a tumultuous period. My in-laws were also here on the ground in Israel. But it just happens to have provided quite a bit of things for me to kind of mull over the 6 or 7 months that have transpired since, in which I haven't even looked at the news today. I kind of don't want to, because every time I open the news and read about what's happening with the US sending stuff to Iran and facing off, we talked about how to try to separate the signal from the noise, but I haven't yet perfected that art. And it's kind of torturous to live. I remember after Israel preemptively attacked the Iranian nuclear or some of their infrastructure, we were on tenterhooks for like 2 weeks, and it's really hard to live with like that. You kind of just get adrenaline can only keep you going so far. But one of the things in that period that I really came to appreciate, which I've just picked up an upgraded one, is a travel router. A travel router is a battery-powered router, and I'm using one from a company called Glynet. And they have a great reputation on Reddit, which is usually my barometer for all things in life, because, you know, who wouldn't want to take purchasing advice or general life guidance from a bunch of anonymous people on the internet? But Glynet is a really good. Some people actually don't like them, but I think they're pretty great. They're these battery-powered routers, and they have some fantastic new gear with Wi-Fi 7 and 5G and all the rest of it. And the idea is that basically if you're in a hotel, or for example, we used it recently when we were staying in temporary accommodation and you have an internet connection, and maybe you are a bit paranoid, but you plug your router in and you create like your own network, basically a network within a network. And the cool thing about them actually is that they make it easy to run a VPN. So if you want to use a VPN, but you have your tablet, your phone, all the other things on the network, instead of having a VPN client on every one of them, which often can't happen, you run the VPN centrally on this travel router, and that tunnels all your traffic out through a VPN. And I don't use an always-on VPN or a router level VPN in general, but I think in certain circumstances it's pretty cool. So what I'd like to ask you, Herman and Corn, is what I read before, and I didn't corroborate this, but it seems credible that this technology actually got its kind of it got going due to government surveillance and censorship of the internet in places where maybe even VPNs are illegal. If you can get a router that you can literally stick in a backpack and charge up with USB Type-C, it becomes pretty unconspicuous and pretty easy to get one of those things around the place. So you can imagine trying to lug a traditional internet router around the world. You're going to say, when you go through security, they're going to wonder what on earth you're doing carrying a router in your checked luggage. So I feel like a lot of the benefit of them is that they actually make it really easy to bring a router around the place. They can act as access points, repeaters, true routers. They can do an awful lot, and they're pretty small. So in the Iran-Israel war that I mentioned, there was an Ethernet port in the safe room, but there was no Wi-Fi. There was no way to actually use it. And I mentioned the story that I thought for a second, wait, I could totally just use my travel router. I got it out from my storage. I got an Ethernet cable, and suddenly we had viable internet in a safe space on the ground. So that really cemented my belief. I honestly was kind of kicking myself before. I thought, you know what, that was a really dumb thing to buy. I didn't need that. And after this, I'm as I mentioned, I upgraded because I had a really old one, and this one has cellular, which is great as well for preparedness because it gives you just another situation in which you might be able to use these if you don't have fixed line internet. So Herman and Corn, I'd love to understand a little bit more about the history of these gadgets. They sound pretty obscure, but to my mind, they actually have a lot of use. How did the technology really get its start? Was it born from protests? And beyond the paranoid like me and those hiding in underground car parks, who's actually using these things on a daily basis? We talked before about the network in a box concept that the US military is good at, and I guess thinking on my legs here, they're kind of like the consumer version of a network in a box. You can just bring one with you and set up your own stable subnet. And, I guess if you're on the road a lot, that would be pretty useful too. But I don't get the feeling that they're used in that context much, but I could be wrong. Herman and Corn, let's talk about travel routers. Who uses them? How did they start? In today's episode of My Weird Prompts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to My Weird Prompts. I am Corn, and I am sitting here in our living room in Jerusalem with my brother,
Herman Poppleberry, at your service. It is a beautiful day here, but we are diving into something a bit more technical today. Our housemate Daniel sent us a fascinating prompt about something he has been using lately.
Yeah, Daniel has been obsessed with his new travel router. He was telling me about using it during the recent tensions here, and it got him thinking about where this technology actually comes from. Is it a tool for digital resistance, or just a convenient way to get better Wi-Fi in a hotel?
It is actually a bit of both, but the history is much more grounded in the evolution of how we use the internet on the go. Daniel mentioned the concept of a network in a box, which is a very military-sounding term, and honestly, he is not far off. But to understand the travel router, you have to understand the specific problem it was designed to solve about 15 or 20 years ago.
I remember those days. You would go to a hotel, and if you were lucky, they had a single Ethernet cable coming out of the wall. If you wanted to connect more than one device, you were basically out of luck unless you brought your own hardware.
Exactly. That was the original catalyst. Back in the early 2000s, hotels started offering high-speed internet access, but it was usually limited to one wired connection. If you were a business traveler with a laptop and maybe an early smartphone or a second device, you had to pay per device. That got expensive very quickly. Sometimes it was $10 or $20 per day per device.
So the travel router started as a way to hack the hotel billing system?
In a way, yes. The early travel routers were essentially tiny access points. You would plug the hotel's Ethernet cable into the router and it would create your own private Wi-Fi network. The hotel system only saw one device, your router, but you could connect your laptop, your phone, and your tablet all at once. It was a cost-saving measure and a convenience play.
That makes sense for the early days. But Daniel's question goes deeper. He asked if this technology was born from resistance to government surveillance and censorship. When did it transition from a hotel convenience tool to a privacy powerhouse?
That shift happened because of a very famous legal accident in 2003. Linksys released a router called the WRT54G. It was that iconic blue and black box with the two antennas. It turns out they had used Linux code in the firmware, but had not released the source code, which violated the General Public License, or GPL. A coalition of hackers and activists, led by the Software Freedom Conservancy, basically forced Linksys and their parent company, Cisco, to release that code.
Wait, so the most popular router in the world was accidentally open source?
Precisely. Once that code was out in the wild, the community went nuts. They realized they could write their own operating systems for these devices that were way more powerful than what the manufacturers intended. This led to the birth of Open Wireless Router, or OpenWRT, in early 2004. When developers started porting it to tiny, portable travel routers, it changed everything. Suddenly, you were not just sharing a connection, you were running a full Linux server in your pocket.
And that is where the privacy features come in. If you are running a full operating system, you can install things like virtual private networks, or VPNs, and even the Onion router, also known as Tor.
Precisely. This is where the resistance part of Daniel's question hits home. In countries with heavy internet censorship or surveillance, a travel router becomes a bridge to the outside world. If you are in a place where certain websites are blocked, you can configure your travel router to automatically tunnel all traffic through a VPN to a server in a different country. Every device you connect to that router is then automatically protected and bypass the local restrictions. You do not have to install VPN software on every single phone and laptop. The router handles it at the source.
I can see why that would be appealing. It creates a sort of portable bubble of trust. No matter where you are, a cafe, an airport, or a hotel, the environment outside your router might be hostile or monitored, but inside your little Wi-Fi bubble, everything is encrypted and secure.
And that is a huge deal for journalists, activists, and even corporate travelers who are worried about industrial espionage. But to address the military side of Daniel's prompt, let us talk about the network in a box concept. In the military, they use something called Tactical Communications Nodes, or TCNs. These are ruggedized, highly secure versions of exactly what we are talking about. They are designed to be dropped into a remote area and immediately establish a secure, encrypted network for soldiers to share data, voice, and video.
So is a consumer travel router just a light version of a tactical comms node?
Effectively, yes. The military version, like the TCN Lite used by the United States Army, might have satellite backhaul or long-range radio links, whereas a consumer travel router uses things like public Wi-Fi or a cellular modem as its backhaul. But the core logic creating a secure, private local area network in an unpredictable environment is identical. When Daniel mentioned the brand GL.iNet, he was talking about a company that has really leaned into this. They build their devices specifically to run OpenWRT out of the box, and they include physical switches on the side of the router that you can toggle to turn your VPN on or off instantly.
That physical switch seems like a small detail, but it speaks to that mindset of wanting control over your digital footprint. It is not hidden in a menu. It is a physical toggle. I am curious about the daily use cases, though. Daniel asked who is actually using these daily beyond the paranoid. I mean, I consider myself pretty tech savvy, but I usually just use my phone's hotspot if the hotel Wi-Fi is bad.
Hotspots are great for one person, but they have limitations. They drain your phone battery, they often have limits on how many devices can connect, and they do not offer the same level of routing control. Think about digital nomads, people who work from different countries every month. If you are a digital nomad, you have a set of devices, a laptop, a tablet, a Kindle, maybe a smart speaker or a Chromecast. If you move to a new Airbnb every week, you have to reconfigure every single one of those devices to the new Wi-Fi password. It is a nightmare.
Ah, I see. But if you have a travel router, you just connect the router to the Airbnb Wi-Fi once, and all your other devices stay connected to the router. They do not even know you moved.
Exactly. Your entire digital home travels with you. Your Chromecast still works, your laptop still sees your portable printer, and everything just works. It is about reducing friction. But there is another big daily use case that most people do not think about, the captive portal problem. You know when you join a hotel Wi-Fi and a page pops up asking for your room number and last name?
Oh, I hate those. Half the time they do not load properly on my phone, or they time out after an hour.
Travel routers are built to beat those. They have a feature called MAC address cloning. The router can pretend to be your phone. You sign into the hotel Wi-Fi on your phone, get past the captive portal, and then tell the router to clone your phone's hardware address. The hotel network thinks the router is your phone, and suddenly all your devices are online without ever seeing that annoying login page again.
That is actually incredibly useful. It is less about being a secret agent, and more about not wanting to deal with terrible hotel IT. But let us go back to the surveillance aspect for a second. We are living in a time where digital privacy feels more fragile than ever. If I'm using a travel router in a public place, what am I actually protecting myself from? Is it just the guy sitting at the next table with a laptop? Or is it something bigger?
It is both. On a local level, you are protecting yourself from man-in-the-middle attacks. In a public Wi-Fi setting, it is relatively easy for someone to set up a fake access point with the same name as the cafe's Wi-Fi. If you connect to their fake network, they can see everything you are doing. A travel router helps because it can act as a firewall between you and that public network. Plus, if you are running a VPN on the router, all the data leaving the router is encrypted before it even hits the cafe's airwaves.
So even if the network is compromised, they're just seeing encrypted gibberish.
Exactly. But on a larger scale, it is about data sovereignty. Most public Wi-Fi providers, especially the free ones, make their money by tracking your browsing habits and selling that data to advertisers. They see which sites you visit, how long you stay there, and what your interests are. When you use a travel router with a VPN, the provider only sees one connection to one IP address, your VPN server. They lose the ability to profile you.
It feels like we are seeing a democratization of tools that used to be reserved for high-level security professionals or the military. I remember we talked about something similar in episode 321, where we were looking at AI animation tools, how the barrier to entry for complex technology is just collapsing.
It really is. 10 years ago, if you wanted a portable VPN router, you had to buy a compatible device, flash a custom firmware yourself, which carried the risk of breaking the device, and then configure the VPN protocols via a command line. It was a hobbyist's game. Now, you can buy a device for $60 that does it all with a pretty interface.
So, what does this mean for the future of travel and work? As we see more people moving around, especially with the rise of remote work, do you think the travel router becomes a standard piece of kit, like a power bank?
I think so, especially as we move toward Wi-Fi 7 and more integrated 5G. Some of the newer travel routers, like the ones Daniel was looking at, have built-in cellular slots. You do not even need the hotel Wi-Fi. You just pop in a local SIM card or an eSIM, and you have your own high-speed private internet bubble anywhere in the city. It is the ultimate freedom for someone who needs to stay connected but does not want to rely on the infrastructure of whatever building they happen to be in.
It is interesting to think about how this affects the providers, too. If everyone starts using these, do hotels and cafes start blocking them? I imagine they are not happy about people bypassing their paywalls or tracking.
Some do try. They look for signatures of common VPN protocols, or they try to detect if multiple devices are hiding behind a single MAC address. But it is a constant cat-and-mouse game. The developers of OpenWRT and companies like GL.iNet are very good at finding ways to make the traffic look like normal web browsing. It is that classic tech cycle restriction leads to innovation, which leads to more restriction.
It is funny because Daniel's question about the paranoid really gets to the heart of how we perceive security. What one person calls paranoia, another person calls basic digital hygiene. It is like locking your front door. You are probably not going to get robbed today, but you lock it anyway because the cost of doing it is low and the protection is high.
That is a great analogy. Using a travel router is like bringing your own high-quality lock to a hotel room instead of trusting the flimsy one they provide. And for people living in volatile regions or working in sensitive fields, it is not paranoia at all. It is a necessity. If you look at the history of how these tools have been used in places like Hong Kong or during the Arab Spring, you see that portable encrypted communication is often the only thing that allows information to flow when governments try to shut it down.
It is a powerful thought. This tiny plastic box in Daniel's backpack is actually a descendant of military-grade communication tools and a weapon against digital authoritarianism. But for him, it is also just a way to make sure his Netflix works without a hitch while he is traveling.
That is the beauty of consumer tech. It takes these massive world-changing concepts and shrinks them down into something that fits in your pocket and makes your life slightly more convenient. But the power is still there, under the hood. If you ever need to bypass a firewall or protect your identity from a prying government, that $60 router is ready to do it.
I want to dig into the technical side a bit more, specifically why Daniel mentioned Wi-Fi 7 and 5G. We are seeing these massive jumps in speed, but does a travel router actually keep up? I mean, if the source internet is slow, does the router even matter?
That is a common misconception. People think a router can magically make slow internet fast. It cannot. If the hotel has a 10 megabit connection, your router is limited to 10 megabits. However, a good travel router can make the most of a bad connection. For example, many of them have dual-band or even tri-band radios. They can connect to the hotel on the 5 GHz band and broadcast to your devices on the 2.4 GHz band, which reduces interference and congestion.
And what about the processing power? I know that encrypting data through a VPN takes a lot of work for a little chip.
That used to be the biggest bottleneck. If you had an old travel router and tried to run a VPN, your speeds would drop by 80% because the tiny processor could not keep up with the encryption math. But the newer chips are designed specifically for this. They use a protocol called WireGuard, which is much more efficient than the older OpenVPN standard. With WireGuard, these pocket routers can handle hundreds of megabits of encrypted traffic without breaking a sweat.
It is incredible how far it has come. I remember when using a VPN meant your internet felt like dial-up. Now, if you are using WireGuard on a modern chip, you barely notice a difference.
Exactly. And that is why more people are using them daily. It is no longer a sacrifice. You get the security and the convenience without the speed penalty. And since we are talking about daily use, think about the security of your home devices when you are on the road. If you have a smart home setup, you can actually set up a site-to-site VPN. Your travel router can stay permanently connected to your home router.
Wait, so I could be in a coffee shop in London, and my laptop thinks it is sitting on my desk here in Jerusalem?
Precisely. You can access your home file server, your security cameras, and even your local streaming services as if you never left. It bypasses all those annoying geographic blocks that streaming companies use. If you want to watch Israeli news while you are in the States, a site-to-site VPN on your travel router makes it look like you are right here on our couch.
Okay, I am starting to see why Daniel is so excited about this. It is like a Swiss Army knife for the internet. It is a bridge, a firewall, a VPN gateway, and a media server all in one.
It really is. And the historical context of it being a consumer version of a network in a box is spot on. The military calls it C4 I Command Control Communications, Computers, and Intelligence. A travel router gives the average person their own little version of that. You have command and control over your data, you have secure communications, and you have the computing power to manage it all on the fly.
It is a long way from just trying to save $10 on a hotel Wi-Fi bill.
It really is. But that is how most great tech starts. It solves a small, annoying problem, and then people realize it can be used to solve much bigger, more fundamental problems. The travel router is a testament to the power of open source software. Without OpenWRT, these would just be cheap plastic toys. Because of that community of developers, they are powerful tools for digital sovereignty.
That feels like a good place to start wrapping this up. We have covered the history, from the early days of hotel Ethernet cables to the modern era of encrypted bubbles and 5G backhaul. We have looked at the military parallels and the very real daily benefits for anyone who works remotely or just values their privacy.
And I think the big takeaway is that these tools are for everyone. You do not have to be a tech expert or a secret agent to benefit from a more secure, more convenient way to stay online. If you value your time and your data, it is a small investment that pays off every time you open your laptop in a new place.
Definitely. And hey, if you are listening to this and you have a weird tech tool that you use every day, something that most people might think is overkill but you find essential, we want to hear about it. Daniel always sends us these great prompts, but we love hearing from the rest of the community too.
Absolutely. You can find us at our website, myweirdprompts.com. There is a contact form there, or you can find us on Spotify and most other podcast apps. And if you have a second, leaving a review really does help other people find the show. We are up to episode 325 now, and it is all thanks to you guys keeping the questions coming.
Yeah, the curiosity of this community is what keeps us going. Whether it is about global flight tracking like we discussed last week in episode 324, or the intricacies of travel routers today, we love diving into these rabbit holes with you.
It has been a blast. Thanks for joining us today in Jerusalem. I am Herman Poppleberry.
And I am Corn. Thanks to Daniel for the prompt, and thanks to all of you for listening. This has been My Weird Prompts. We will catch you in the next one.
Until next time, stay curious and keep your data safe.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
So, Herman, be honest. Are you going to go buy the new Wi-Fi 7 model now that we have talked about it for 20 minutes?
Corn, I already have 3 of them in my shopping cart. I am just trying to decide which color matches my backpack better.
I should have known. See you guys next week.
Bye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.